Ever watched a disaster movie that felt so real you couldn't sleep afterward? Some films don't just entertain.
Powdered.
They predict our nightmares with terrifying accuracy. Nuclear war, pandemics, climate collapse. Today we're counting down 7 sci-fi disaster films that still terrify audiences. Let's dive in.
We've got enough food, Jim.
We don't have any cheeseburgers.
7, 28 Days Later, 2002, Danny Boyle directed Rage Virus outbreak film that redefined zombie horror for the 21st century. Cillian Murphy wakes from coma to find London completely empty and overrun by infected who aren't technically dead. They're just filled with uncontrollable rage. The opening hospital scene with Murphy wandering deserted corridors, calling for anyone, is haunting and unforgettable. The deserted London imagery became iconic. Empty Westminster Bridge, abandoned streets, the city that never stops completely silent. Boyle shot on digital video, giving everything raw, documentary feel that makes it terrifyingly real. Society collapsed in 4 weeks. The government is gone. The military that remains becomes a worse threat than the infected. What makes it still terrify is how fast civilization falls, not years or months, weeks. The infected aren't supernatural. They're victims of bioweapon research that escaped containment. The virus spreads through blood and saliva, making every encounter potentially fatal. The film influenced The Walking Dead and entire zombie renaissance, but remains more disturbing because the infected are alive and suffering. The rage virus is scarier than traditional zombies because it's scientifically plausible. Rabies on steroids, aggression without reason or control. 28 Days Later predicted pandemic fears before COVID made them real. Watching it now, after experiencing lockdowns and empty streets, hits differently. It's not fantasy anymore. It's an uncomfortable reminder of how fragile society actually is. Next, we travel back to 1959 for the bleakest nuclear war film ever made, where everyone dies and there's absolutely no hope anywhere.
May I be of assistance?
Yes, I'm looking for Captain Towers.
I'll try to locate him for you.
6. On the Beach, 1959. Stanley Kramer adapted Neville Shute's novel about Australia waiting for radiation cloud after nuclear war destroyed the Northern Hemisphere. Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, and Fred Astaire star in film about inevitable death with no escape or salvation possible. Everyone knows they're going to die. The only question is when the radiation arrives. Peck plays submarine commander who leads mission to investigate radio signal from Northern Hemisphere. They find nobody alive anywhere. The signal was automated. Hope dies with that discovery back in Australia. The government distributes suicide pills so people can die with dignity before radiation sickness destroys them slowly and painfully. The ending is absolutely devastating. Empty streets, abandoned buildings, a banner reading, "There is still time, brother," flapping in the wind over dead city. No survivors, no hope, no future. Humanity ended and nature continues without us. The film offers no comfort or optimism. Nuclear war means extinction and nothing survives. On the Beach still terrifies because the scenario remains plausible. Nuclear arsenals exist. Tensions rise between nations. The film shows what happens when deterrence fails and everyone loses. There are no winners in nuclear war. Kramer made that brutally clear in 1959, and nothing about our reality makes it less true 65 years later. The inevitability is what makes it unbearable. Next, we jump forward to 1961 for the climate disaster film that predicted our current crisis with disturbing accuracy. 5. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. Val Guest directed British disaster film about nuclear tests knocking Earth's axis toward the sun. Journalists at London newspaper investigate strange weather patterns and rising temperatures while government tries to cover up what's happening. The black and white cinematography intensifies the sweaty desperation as the planet literally cooks. The film builds dread through small details, water shortages, heat waves. Fog in London becomes steam as Thames starts boiling. Society slowly realizes what's happening and panic sets in. Scientists attempt desperate solution by detonating more nuclear bombs to correct Earth's trajectory. The ending is ambiguous. Church bells ringing while newspaper prints 2 headlines, Earth Saved and Earth Doomed, not knowing which will be true. What makes the day the Earth caught fire still terrify is how it predicts climate change allegory decades early. Humans caused the disaster through nuclear testing. The planet becomes uninhabitable. Desperate geoengineering attempts may or may not work. The atmospheric desperation as temperatures keep rising feels uncomfortably familiar watching during record-breaking heat waves and climate crisis denialism. The film is forgotten compared to other disaster classics, but it deserves recognition. The environmental disaster caused by human activity predicted our current crisis, the government cover-up, and public panic when truth emerges mirrors our response to climate science. The ambiguous ending reflects our current uncertainty about whether we can still save ourselves or if it's already too late. Next, we have Steven Soderbergh's pandemic thriller that predicted COVID-19 response with such accuracy it became unwatchable after 2020. 4. Contagion, 2011. Steven Soderbergh consulted epidemiologists and scientists to create most realistic pandemic film ever made. MEV-1 virus spreads globally from patient 0. Gwyneth Paltrow dies within first 20 minutes, showing nobody is safe. Matt Damon plays immune husband trying to protect his daughter, while society collapses around them. Scientists race to develop vaccine while misinformation spreads faster than the virus. The film predicted COVID-19 response with disturbing precision. Runs on stores, social distancing, mask debates, conspiracy theories spreading online, government scrambling to respond, healthcare systems overwhelmed. The film was released in 2011 but feels like documentary of 2020. Soderbergh got everything right about how pandemics spread and how humans respond with fear, selfishness, and denial. What makes Contagion unbearable to watch post-COVID is recognition. We lived through everything the film depicted: empty shelves, refrigerator trucks for bodies, exhausted healthcare workers, people refusing to believe the virus is real, even as people die around them. The film showed us the future and we ignored the warning completely. The ending shows the virus origin: deforestation causing bat to drop infected fruit eaten by pig, eaten by patient 0. Human activity caused the pandemic. That's the final terror. It was an unavoidable natural disaster. We created the conditions for our own catastrophe. Contagion is science fiction that became documentary, showing us exactly what would happen, and we let it happen anyway. Next, we traveled to 1971 for the most realistic depiction of pandemic response that predicted government bioweapon research and COVID protocols decades early. 3. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. Robert Wise adapted Michael Crichton's novel as realistic procedural about alien microorganism killing entire town. Scientists quarantine themselves in underground facility racing to understand the organism before it spreads globally. The documentary style makes everything feel real and immediate. No action heroes, no explosions, just scientists working methodically while deadly organism mutates faster than they can study it. The film predicted pandemic response procedures with frightening accuracy, contamination protocols, scientists in isolation, political pressure to rush solutions, equipment failures at critical moments, the organism mutating to survive, making vaccines impossible. Everything feels plausible because Wise and Crichton based it on actual science and government bioweapon research programs. The ending reveals the organism was accidentally brought back by military satellite designed to capture potential biological weapons from space. Government experiments caused the crisis. Scientists barely survive through luck rather than skill. The organism mutates into harmless form before it can kill everyone. Humanity gets lucky this time, but the film makes clear we won't always be so fortunate. The Andromeda Strain terrifies through realism. After COVID-19, watching scientists struggle with unknown pathogen hits differently. We saw real scientists face same challenges. We experienced the fear of contagion. The procedural approach that seemed boring in 1971 is now devastating because we understand how real it is. The film warned us pandemics can happen and governments aren't prepared. We ignored it and paid the price. Next, we have the BBC docudrama that traumatized an entire generation and remains the most depressing film ever made about nuclear war. 2. Threads, 1984. The BBC-made nuclear war docudrama so realistic and devastating, it was banned from rebroadcast for years. Sheffield, England gets hit during escalating conflict between superpowers. The bombs drop. Millions die instantly in the flash. Then the film keeps going for decades, showing society's complete collapse and failure to ever recover. Threads doesn't stop at the bombing. It shows years and decades after. Radiation sickness killing survivors slowly, starvation, disease, the government executing looters and leaving bodies hanging as warnings, language skills deteriorating, farming regressing to medieval techniques, children born severely deformed and brain damage from radiation and malnutrition. Society doesn't rebuild, it becomes permanently destroyed. The ending is the most disturbing moment in television history. A young woman, born after the war and mentally impaired from radiation, gives birth in filthy barn with no medical care. The baby emerges and she screams in horror at what she sees. Cut to black, credits, no resolution, no hope, just that scream echoing in your mind forever. Threads still terrifies because it's the most honest depiction of nuclear war consequences ever filmed. The day after showed the bombing and immediate aftermath. Threads shows what comes after when nobody made it and there's no recovery. Thatcher and Reagan were forced to watch it. The film made nuclear policy discussions change because politicians finally saw realistic depiction of their weapons' effects. It's unwatchable horror that everyone needs to see because the threat never went away. And at 1, we have the American TV movie that 100 million people watched live and remains seared in the memory of everyone who saw it. 1, the day after 1983, ABC aired television movie about nuclear war hitting Kansas and traumatized an entire nation. 100 million people watched it live, making it the most watched TV movie in history. The film shows normal life in Lawrence, Kansas before Soviet missiles hit. Then it shows the aftermath, radiation sickness, social collapse, survivors slowly dying in overwhelmed hospitals with no help coming. Director Nicholas Meyer made it as realistic as possible. Within network television standards, the bombing sequence is terrifying, the mushroom clouds rising, the flash that blinds people looking at it, buildings vaporizing, people dying instantly while others suffer radiation burns. Jason Robards leads cast through descent into post-nuclear hell, where there are no heroes or salvation, just suffering and death. The hospital scenes are unbearable. Radiation sickness victims with their skin falling off, hair coming out in clumps, vomiting blood, doctors with no medicine or ability to help. The film shows death is slow and agonizing for survivors. Steve Guttenberg later said working on it traumatized him. Schools debated whether to show it to students. Parents struggled with whether children should watch. President Reagan watched it and wrote in his diary it was very effective and left him depressed. The film reportedly influenced his approach to nuclear negotiations with the Soviet Union. That's real-world impact. From television movie, the day after still terrifies because nuclear weapons still exist. And tensions between nuclear powers continue rising. The scenario isn't historical artifact. It's ongoing threat we live under every single day pretending we're safe. Meyer made us look at what happens if deterrence fails. The image of Kansas burning under mushroom clouds never fades. That's why it still terrifies 40 years later. Which disaster scenario terrifies you most? Which film do you think predicted our current reality most accurately? Which one haunts you decades after watching? Drop your answer in the comments below. Hit subscribe for more science fiction that warned us about our future, and smash that like button if these films scared you in ways that never fade. Thanks for watching.